This is Bloomberg Businessweek with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, as conservative politicians bring the rhetoric and beliefs of the evangelical right into mainstream classrooms, reshaping American public education, liberal families are using the right's hard-won homeschooling protections to give their children a secular education in kitchens and living rooms across the country. This is from a story from the Bloomberg Businessweek team.
Yeah, with more on how culture wars here in the U.S. are leading to another deep blow to public education. With us right now is Charley Locke. She's Bloomberg Businessweek freelance contributor. Joining us on Zoom from Portland, Oregon. Her story can be found on the Bloomberg terminal and at bloomberg.com/businessweek. Also here with us in the Bloomberg in the Interactive Brokers studio, the editor of Bloomberg Businessweek, Joel Weber. Joel, good to have you with us. Charley, good to have you with us. I love this story because when you think homeschooling, there's this image of who the typical homeschooler and homeschoolee is in the U.S., and this is sort of puts that entire theory or image on its head.
Story's kind of changing a little bit. So we were working on this package of stories around America and culture wars, and this idea of homeschooling came up. Homeschooling has long been a thing that conservatives have fought for mainly. What we're seeing, though, is as the politics, especially around education, have begun to change and in conservative strongholds, we've seen a stronger intervention in classrooms to even change curriculum. In states that are conservative, we're seeing mostly liberal-leaning parents begin to take advantage of the homeschooling kind of push that was championed by especially evangelicals. So, Charley, bring you in here. Tell us how the story came to you.
Yeah, so I write about kids and education a lot for a number of different outlets, including Bloomberg. And I have noticed over the past few years, just more and more families that I have talked to in the course of my everyday reporting were considering homeschooling, particularly families in red states where there is this increasingly conservative politicization of public education, whether that is in terms of what it's like for kids of color or trans or gay kids to go to public school, or in terms of curriculum and how kids are learning about American history or what they're not learning. And I've just talked to more and more parents who were kind of at their wits' end about what to do. And it made me really curious about, okay, is there this movement of, is it really changing what it means to homeschool your kids, and who's taking advantage of that? Particularly because, as you mentioned, the history of homeschooling in the past 30 or 40 years has really been built around the evangelical right, who have pushed really hard for the rights of homeschoolers, and particularly a certain type of homeschooling that really leaves it all in the hands of the parent without a lot of oversight. And so in states with big evangelical communities like Florida, which I focus on in this story, there are a lot of rights and a lot of resources for homeschoolers because it's been pushed for from this particular demographic background. But now, because of how public schools are changing and how politicians in conservative places are kind of adopting the rhetoric around a parental bill of rights or kind of around school choice, picking up all this rhetoric that the far-right homeschooling movement has used for a long time. Right. It's pushing liberal families out of public schools.
Well, Charley, can you talk a little bit about some of the most, I don't want to use the term egregious, but the anecdotes that you found or kind of what pushed these parents over the edge? You said what they're teaching or what they're not teaching when it comes to American history. I was so surprised to read in your story some of the things that did motivate these parents to move them to homeschool their kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one that was really striking to me is one mom that I talked to in Florida whose twins were in 6th grade in public school in Florida last year, and their history teacher taught them that manifest destiny referred to Native Americans who decided to move west because they wanted to try somewhere else and have more space. And the mom looked at the curriculum and looked at the slides from that day's class. She didn't really thought maybe her kids had misunderstood the lesson, and the slides had nothing about the Trail of Tears. Really presented manifest destiny as this happy choice that Native people in the Southeast made. There are other parents I talked to. One mom whose all of the books were removed from her kids' elementary school in classrooms and in the school library. And for, I think, 6 months last year, there were just no books at school, and kids weren't allowed to bring them because books hadn't gone through the Florida approval system yet. And she felt like, I can't send my kid to a school that isn't allowed to have any books in it. I mean, pretty egregious moves. Yeah.
This is America today. What's interesting, too, is I feel like I wonder about the people. Tim and I were talking about this actually before we got going. Is these people, were they nervous about talking to you? And we're curious about how you found them. Was it difficult to find them?
Yeah, a lot of the families were quite nervous about talking to me, and we do grant anonymity to a number of the parents in this article. I mean, there's a real risk. I think that for a lot of these families, there's a real risk both that, you know, in their communities that they would be ostracized because of some of the choices that they're making, and also in terms of the support that they're getting. States like Florida actually give money to homeschooling families to support them and support homeschooling. And some of the moms in particular in the story talked about how they really feel this tension between wanting those finances from the state of Florida or other states to be able to support their kids' education, but also not wanting to take away money from public schools. And so they don't want to have their name in there to jeopardize the funding that's enabling their kids to learn at home. But you know, a lot of how I building a story like this takes a really long time, and I spent about 6 months building relationships with people who run communities like the CE Homeschoolers group on Facebook, and kind of building community with people who are educators of homeschoolers. And then a lot of it is word of mouth, talking to one mom who connects me to her local group, who connects me to someone else who'll talk to me.
Charley, I'm interested especially from the mothers you talked to, and you made I thought, a very clear point in the story about how mom-centric all of this is. I am curious, like, does this feel just like a permanent shift for them, or are they contemplating moving because of this? Like, what are the long-term implications that you got a sense of from your reporting?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think it's a very family to family question. I think a lot of these parents, this is not an ideal solution for them and for their kids. There's a lot that they're having to sacrifice, particularly so many moms who were working in professional workplaces before this and felt like their only option was to step back and full-time homeschool their kids. But it's not very sustainable financially for their family. It's not really what they want in terms of their careers and time. And some families are trying to figure out how to move out of state. I mean, it's hard to uproot your life and do that, right? Yeah. And other families who are kind of hoping that things will get better and hope that by the time their kids are in high school, they'll be able to send their kids back to public school. But it's kind of trying to make the least bad decision for a lot of these families.
You know, the other thing that your story explores is, as people leave public schools, that it creates this downward spiral. And since 2020, you cite 1.2 million K through 12 students have left public education in the U.S. The same people who once celebrated the institutions, once they leave like this, it means that the schools end up taking a tax hit too, right?
Yeah. It means pretty substantial and honestly pretty scary hits for public school, both because public schools are mostly funded by taxes within communities and by allocations federally based on how many students are enrolled in a public school. And so when a bunch of families pull their kids from public school, it means the schools get less money federally because they have less students enrolled there. And it also means that they get less money locally because there's less support for taxes. If you're not sending your own kids to the public school, you don't care as much about supporting those financially through your taxes. And then there are also all of these kind of softer effects too, where a lot of these parents, the parents who are able to step back from work full time and homeschool their kids, are also parents who previously were really involved at the public school in terms of being on the PTA or running fundraising drives or leading field trips. And so there's a lot of kind of the ways that public schools provide a lot of social services for families who need them. They will be less and less able to do that as more and more families who can opt out decide to opt out.
So many aspects of this story, just, you know, the trend in parental rights, the implications for moms and working women, and what it means, you know, Joel, for public school systems going forward.
Does not look good. but there's what I think it shows is the commitment of families, right? And the fact that they saw what was happening and tried to do something about it.
Incredible story. That, of course, is the editor of Businessweek, Joel Weber, and Charley Locke wrote the story, Bloomberg Businessweek freelance contributor. You can find it on the Bloomberg terminal, of course, at bloomberg.com/businessweek.
Well, as I was preparing for our next guest, Carol, I found some fascinating data from the Pew Research Center. Get this. Only 40% of Americans who are ages 18 to 29 view capitalism positively. This is from a 2022 Pew survey. It was done in August of 2022. So that 40% is a low when it comes to age groups, and it's more than 30 percentage points lower than those who are 65 and older.
It doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me.
Do you have a favorable view of
Don't you
capitalism?
feel like you have conversations with younger individuals and they're like, capitalism, not good?
Yeah, I do. And sometimes they outgrow it and sometimes they don't.
Well, you laid out some statistics, right? And the demographic differences don't stop there. There are differences among white, black, Hispanic, and Asian Americans with respect to how they feel about capitalism. So I'm guessing our next guest is going to have some thoughts about this.
Malaika Jabali is the author of a new book, It's Not You, It's Capitalism, Why It's Time to Break Up and How We Move On. She's also senior news and politics editor at Essence Magazine. She joins us on Zoom from Atlanta. Malaika, how are you?
Hi, I'm well. How are you?
We're doing well, thanks. Congratulations on the new book.
Thank you.
This is not just, we say book, but it's like not just like any other book. I mean, This has got some great illustrations in it. It's got some really cool charts. It's got some Drake in there as well. It's awesome.
You keep that. Great.
It's very, very
It's
cool.
digestible, too.
It is totally digestible.
Kind of lay it out.
But I want to know about capitalism. What drew you to questioning capitalism?
Well, you guys kind of hinted at it. It was a lot of things. I had a foundation in these organizations and movements in the South of all places where Black people were questioning it. If you look at where our economy really was founded upon in the South and really the entire country, it was based on Black labor. It was based on free Black labor. And that is how we have capitalism today. And so you had these groups in the South who were looking at our role in this entire system, and we just haven't seen any system. We haven't seen it thrive without that kind of exploitation. Even if you look, beyond the slave trade, if you look beyond plantation slavery. So that was sort of underpinning, I think, just my being open to be critical of the system. But I'm a millennial. Like, I lived in New York City. I was studying securities regulation of all things at Columbia Law School. I was studying primarily at the School of Social Work at Columbia. But literally the class was about looking at the financial crisis, where we got diverted from the core syllabus because Wall Street was falling apart. So we were reading newspaper article after newspaper article. It really became more like a doom scrolling, newspaper session, but it wasn't scrolling at the time. We're flipping through the pages about all these financial industries that were just going underwater. And even then, it was based on targeting, low income families. So I think I started to make the connections between what we were experiencing on like a day to day and the regulations and the policy and the legal infrastructure behind it.
So all capitalism, in your view, bad?
Fundamentally, it's bad. And I think we also have to unpack what we mean by capitalism. There are small business owners. We would consider that, the petty bourgeoisie, just owning a small business and make you bad. I don't think inherently. I think what the critique is really about is that you have a system that incentivizes exploiting labor as much as possible. It incentivizes getting as much profit as you can off of people as possible. So not every person who owns a business is going to do that, but the system does incentivize that. So if you are operating that way, it's logical to do those things because that's how you survive in a capitalist economy.
Malaika, what would you say to someone who said, okay, well, capitalism isn't perfect, but it's the best system that's out there? What would you say to that?
I think we can do better.
What's better?
This is America where, we believe in exceptionalism. I think we can do better. Why not get excellence? Why are we settling for just okay? Again, the book is, or if you could glean from the title, it's looking at our toxic relationships. And we often think, this is the best that I can do. I haven't had better in the past. That's depressing. If we think that a system where we have not seen wage growth keep up with production in 50 years is the best we can do. I don't believe that. Do we really believe this is a system where you have so much poverty and homelessness, where healthcare outcomes are among the worst, if not the worst in many metrics compared to other industrial countries? I think we can get much better than that.
Malaika, a listener saying, are you going to share your book profits?
Well, I don't. I think first people should understand how book deals work. I don't have profits. I'm getting a loan in order to make this book be produced. And if I were to get profits, I would love to share them. There is an organization I work with called Operation Power. I would love to give once I get profits, if that happens. So y'all got to buy the book in order for me to get profits to share. It's a social justice organization that I've worked with that I'd like to give them some profits. There's all kinds of organizations that I would love to give money to if that's how book deals worked.
Is there a country in the world that is doing this well that you would model a system after?
Yeah, I would say actually the United States has a lot of vestiges of that before socialism and socialists were alienated and surveilled and killed in many ways. But we have what's called the Wisconsin School of Economics coming out of UW-Madison. There was an economist who was a socialist named John Commons who brought us the modern day, or his school of thought brought us the modern day Social Security that we have. Through that work, we have workers' compensation. Through that work, we were able to have, 5-day work weeks and workers insurance, workplace insurance, unemployment insurance. So this school of thought really countered what was happening with the Chicago School of Economics, where it was very conservative. And so in UW-Madison, they really wanted to center labor. So a lot of these economists ended up working under FDR, doing his New Deal regulations and administration and working on his laws to create the laws that we have right now. So I think we just need to keep up the work that we had started on that we abandoned.
We've unfortunately run out of time. Malaika, I hope you come back because I'd love to continue this conversation because I think it's a provocative one, an interesting one, considering I think about Peter Atwater and the K-shaped recovery, and we talk about the gaps and the inequities where not everybody enjoys in kind of the fruits, if you will, whether it's the public markets or are sharing in the profits of companies. But I feel like we've got to go a little bit more deeper. So come back soon. Malaika Jabali, she is the author of a new book. It's Not You, It's Capitalism, Why It's Time to Break Up and How to Move On. She's also senior news and politics editor at Essence Magazine, joining us on Zoom from Atlanta. You are listening and watching Bloomberg Businessweek. Massar, Tim Stenovec, and this is Bloomberg Radio.